Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Candice Garcia Heintz, descendant of the first Mexican family to settle in Kenosha. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. When did your part of the family come to Kenosha?
I believe it was in the mid-1920s. I don't have an exact date. I'm thinking around 1923, 24, somewhere in that area.
Okay. And go ahead.
I was going to say, when I tried to look at the census, because they give them every 10 years, and they were not there in the 1920 census, but they were there in the 1930 census.
Okay. And where did the family come from?
Originally from Jalisco, Mexico, and then I think they went through Texas and up to Powell. My father was born in Powell, Wyoming, which is in Park County, in Wyoming, because I found a draft notice for the First World War for my grandfather, Julian Garcia.
Okay.
From, I believe it was either 1917 or 1918.
Okay. And
go
ahead.
After that, then they came to Kenosha.
Did your grandfather come alone, or did he come with other family members?
The whole family came.
And who would that be?
There was my grandmother, Margarita, their oldest daughter, Isabel, my Aunt Ruth, which was my father's next sister, was Ruth, my father, Arthur, and I think they had a younger brother, Robert, and he passed away.
Okay. Did your grandfather come with his brother?
I believe so. There were other family members, cousins or brothers and sisters that were already in Kenosha. Fairmain Perez and Casimira. He was Casimira Perez, but her maiden name was Garcia.
Okay. All right. And what did your grandfather do when he came to Kenosha?
I'm not certain. They, I know my father did farm work, migrant farm working. So I imagine they did some of that.
Okay. And who did your father?
I remember hearing something about chicken fighting or something like that, cockfighting, yeah. But I don't know how accurate that was.
So who did your father work for?
My father?
Yes.
I'm not sure. He was a boy at the time. His uncle, Joseph Garcia, made the arrangements for him to work, and most of the money went to Joseph, and then he dealt it out to my grandmother. At that point, my grandfather had already passed away. He had passed away in 1927. Okay. So by the time they did the 1930 census, she was a widow.
Okay. And then your father, what was he doing for work once he moved here and at a career, if you will?
Yeah, he was a boy at the time. And like I said, he did some migrant farm working in that. He went to school at Kenosha High School. And then afterwards, he did various jobs around Kenosha. He worked in foundries. So I know when he finished working for other people, he was at the North Chicago Hardware Foundry. He also worked at Arneson Foundry. He worked at Nash in the foundry. And that, so he was a molder by trade.
Okay. And anything else about your father that you remember? Did he speak, he spoke Spanish? He spoke English?
Well, he spoke everything.
Okay.
He spoke Spanish. He, learned Spanish and that. He spoke fluent English. I mean, he spoke it and you couldn't tell if he had an accent or not. He grew up in Kenosha, which was like a melting pot with a lot of different families, mostly in Kenosha because it's German and Italian. My father learned German and Italian and could speak it as well as he could English and Spanish. So he could speak German to some people and could speak the Italian to a lot of the Italian people in Kenosha because that's how they grew up.
Okay. And did this become something he could do in his work, or was this just in the neighborhoods and families around where he lived, or what?
Families and friends and that. In the foundry, it was mostly English-speaking people. My grandmother spent a lot of time before I was born living with my dad and mom. And at that time, my mother, who was French Canadian and she was born in northern Wisconsin, she taught my grandmother Margarita how to speak English, and my grandmother Margarita taught my mom how to speak Spanish.
Oh, okay.
And then plus grandma taught my mom a lot of Mexican recipes and that. So my mom could cook different foods, Mexican foods and that. And so I learned how to cook them.
Okay.
And I've passed them on to my sister-in-laws.
All right. And when your dad finished working in the foundries, what did he do?
My parents bought a bar. It was called Art and Joyce's Club over on 15th, 68th Street and 15th Avenue. When we finally sold it after my parents passed away or my mother passed away and my dad was disabled, we sold it and it became the Kenosha Racine. I'm trying to think, some sort of center and that where you would,
Urban League?
Urban League, that's it.
Okay. And what kind of a person was your mom and dad to operate a tavern?
Oh, they were very personable. We had a lot of workers that came in. My mom made food that she sold behind the bar, hot beef and soups and things like that. And so we would get people from the factories and foundries around. American Brass was going strong then. And so a lot of those people would come in during their lunchtime and then after work and have a shot and a beer and a sandwich and that during lunch and after work.
So it was kind of a tavern for the workers who were in the neighborhood. Okay. What other kind of clientele did they have? Was it a neighborhood bar as well, or was it?
Yeah, it was a neighborhood bar and there was a lot of people. She sponsored a lot of sporting teams, basketball, softball, bowling leagues, and that. They had a back room attached to the bar. And so they would rent it out for weddings and all different kinds of parties. My mom would have a banquet at the end of the various sporting leagues at the end of their season. And she put on like a spaghetti dinner for everybody, so they could talk and celebrate their victories or losses or whatever it is.
Did you find
So-
yourself or siblings working at the bar?
Oh, yeah, all of us did, in one capacity or another. When we were young, my younger brother and I used to stock the coolers because they also sold beer and soda over the counter. And sometimes we got eggs from a farmer out in Pleasant Prairie, and we packaged those up and we sold the eggs and various other things. So my younger brother and I would stock the coolers, and one of my older brothers would help wash the floors and things like that. And my oldest brothers, they would bartend on weekends and help out a lot.
Oh, quite the family affair.
Absolutely.
Okay. And how long did you work with the bar? You said that after your father was disabled and your mother passed away, you sold it?
Yeah. My first husband, James Weber, and I ran the bar when my mom got really sick and that. So we both worked full time, but then we would go into the bar afterwards or in the morning beforehand and take care of the money stuff and make sure we had employees, bartenders that would cover the different shifts and that. And we ran it for about 2 years on that. And till it got to be way too much for us to do because we were just starting out our family and that. I had a little daughter and I was pregnant with my son, and it just got to be too much for us. So we sold it.
And what was your full-time job at the time?
I was an educational assistant for Kenosha Unified. I worked there for 34 years,
Okay.
bouncing around, so I worked with special needs children.
Was this on the elementary level or middle school or?
I'm certified pre-K through 21.
Okay, so that's pretty much the whole gamut.
Yeah, it just depended where I was needed and what needed to be done. So I didn't work very much in the pre-K, but a lot of elementary and middle school. I spent quite a few years over at Tremper High School working there with kids with physical disabilities.
And what kind of things did you do with the students?
Well, some of them had physical needs where they needed assistance, bathrooms and things like that, assist with their therapies, go into classrooms and tutor, some of them were physically disabled, but mentally they were fine. So I would take notes for them to help them study. Some of the kids, they had cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy and that. And so that was a lot of physical needs I took care of. In the elementary, it was more kids that had emotional needs and helped to teach them coping mechanisms, and ones with learning disabilities help with studies and teaching them how to do various things and little learning hints and tricks and on how to remember and how, helping them learn their different facts and the whole gamut.
Do you remember anyone in your family or your relations, cousins or whatever, facing any kind of discrimination or bias because of your heritage?
Not a lot. My father or my mother was asked a question or some questions sometimes, how can you be married to a Mexican? Does he carry a knife? Does he carry a gun? And, because she was basically white, and he was Mexican. He wasn't a very dark Mexican, but with the surname of Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
There was just some connotations, but they really didn't have a lot of problem with it.
And when did you learn about your family's history in Kenosha?
Well, back in, I think it was 1976, the Kenosha News came out with a flyer or something to celebrate the bicentennial. And they had a section in there that talked about some of the original families. And it was like they had Garcia, they had Perez, and they had Uribe. And it's like, oh, it's my family. And that's, so I got curious and did a little research, and I've been doing it on and off for years. I joined Ancestry and did a lot of research with that. I had a cousin's wife that was a teacher, and she started a book, and I'm not sure where it went to after she passed away, but she had done a lot of research, and they had traveled and found some information about where our family came from. That's how we found out that they were from Jalisco, Mexico.
Okay. Were there any interesting things you learned about family members in your research?
Well, talking with my cousin Ines, she told me that when she was talking with Grandma Margarita, that Grandma told her that years ago her family was talking about going back to the old country to visit sometime. And we took it that she meant going to Spain and that. And she go, oh no, Germany. You know, part of the family was from the Perez were originally from Germany. Now, I haven't found any other records or anything to show that, but I mean, this is what my grandmother had told Ines, and then Ines told me.
So you have some kind of relationship in Germany, and your mother was French Canadian.
Right.
Grandfather was Mexican.
And German. Yeah, I'm Heintz 57. We've got a little bit of everything, because from my mom was born in Leona, Wisconsin, which is up in Forest County, Nicolay National Forest. And so my grandfather there was a logger before they came down to Kenosha. So he was a logger, and Grandpa Julian and my dad was a migrant worker. And so my brother Julian used to joke around and say that we're migrant lumberjacks.
Well, I imagine there were some.
So it's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else.
Other stories that you may have uncovered or learned in talking to your relatives?
I'm trying to think. There's well, I know, well, my brother Julian was he moved out to Tucson, and being, you know, with the name Garcia, they thought, oh, that'll be nice having him on the force because there's a lot of Mexicans down here and that. Well, Julian didn't speak much Spanish at that time, you know, because he was born and raised in Wisconsin, and my parents only used Spanish when they were trying to talk together with the kids around each other, you know, with the kids around, so they wouldn't know what they were saying and that, you know, like, you know, what to buy so-and-so for Christmas. So they would say it in Spanish. And we didn't know what they were saying because we weren't exposed to a lot of Spanish. Yeah, so
did your family celebrate the Mexican culture?
Not a lot. And that, like, I didn't have a quinceanera or anything like that. They did belong to Kenosha Latin American Society, but that wasn't until I was like in high school. And we did, and they would have meetings and that, and sponsor scholarships and have Mexican dinners and stuff with a group of families that were in Kenosha, like the Lannises and Soto, and I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. Gomez. So, I mean, they'd get together and they would do different things, and that it isn't like now in Kenosha, there might be a lot of Hispanic people, but they're coming from a rougher type of crowd, where the ones that my parents associated with weren't like a rough crowd. They were very educated and had jobs that weren't always blue collar. And that, like my Uncle George, my Aunt Ruth, Aunt Ruth was Garcia, but she married a Robles, and they lived up in Milwaukee. Their daughter and son still do. And my Uncle George was very learned, and he used to help out at the Spanish Center, and he would translate for people. If they had letters and stuff, or they needed to do something legal, he would translate for them.
Okay.
Yeah, and
And-
he actually, what's funny is he actually went to school with Golda Meir.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How well did they know each other?
I'm not certain, but I remember Uncle George saying that they went to school together, which I thought really interesting. Once she became the head of the Israeli government,
Mhm.
the prime minister. So
You mentioned that you didn't sense or see much discrimination or prejudice. Was there ever a way or a time when your heritage was an advantage?
well, when I was getting ready to go to college, there were a few more scholarships available to Hispanics at that time. So I was able to get some minor scholarships when before I attended Parkside.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to Parkside, back then the tuition was, in the hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars like it is right now. So I was able to go to Parkside for basically the cost of the books.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it was a definite advantage.
Okay.
And I think, one of my brothers, Terry, was starting like a contracting business, doing some building or something. And he needed proof that he was, even though his last name was Garcia, he went to my dad for proof that he was Mexican, because it would enable him to get a contract. So.
Okay. And when did you retire from KUSD?
School district. 2016.
Okay. And did you stay in Kenosha long after that?
Not really. My husband was born and raised in northwestern Wisconsin, Clark County, Jackson County area. And so what we did is, when we sold our house, we had purchased land. We have 20 acres, and little by little we fixed it up and we built our dream home up here. So it's beautiful.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Oh, I mention that my family I had 7 older brothers, 1 younger brother.
Okay.
So my name was picked out for the second oldest. And my mom kept the name until she finally had me.
Oh, okay. So she wanted a girl for their second child and already knew the name, but had to wait until you came along.
Right.
Okay.
So 7 boys before I was born. My brother Julian was the lucky 7th son.
Oh. Mhm.
So.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. It was nice talking to you.